It was a chilly evening, the kind where the wind cuts right through your jacket and makes you tuck your hands deep into your pockets. The streets of downtown bustled with the usual noise, honking cars, hurried footsteps, and the occasional laughter from people leaving restaurants, their bellies full and their minds carefree. But amid all the movement, there were those who weren't rushing anywhere. They had no warm place to go, no dinner waiting for them, and no hands to tuck into their pockets because they didn't even own a jacket. Inside a small family-run restaurant, the rich aroma of sizzling food filled the air. Plates clattered in the kitchen, and the steady hum of conversation blended with the soft music playing in the background. The place wasn't fancy, but it had a warmth to it, both from the glowing lights overhead and the people working tirelessly behind the counter. One of them was Alex, a young chef who had been working there for a few years. He wasn't just good at his job, he cared about it. He believed food wasn't just something to eat. It was something that could comfort, heal, and even bring people together. Alex had seen him before, the homeless man who always sat on the corner near the restaurant. He never begged, never approached anyone. He just sat there, tucked against the side of the building, as if trying to take up as little space as possible. Some nights, customers would glance at him and quickly look away. Others would pretend he wasn't there at all. But Alex noticed him, and every time he did, something inside him twisted. That night, as Alex was packing up meals for the last few customers, he glanced out the window and saw the man again. His thin frame, his shivering hands, the way he pulled his tattered coat tighter around himself. It was impossible to ignore. Alex had a choice. He could go home like everyone else, enjoy a warm meal and forget what he had seen. Or he could do something about it. Without hesitation, he packed an extra meal, a full one, not leftovers, not scraps. A meal just as good as what he served to paying customers. He wrapped it carefully, making sure it stayed warm, and then stepped outside. The cold air bit at his skin as he walked toward the man, his breath visible in the night air. "Hey," Alex said gently, crouching down so he wasn't towering over him. The man looked up, surprised. His eyes were tired, but there was something in them, something that hadn't been completely lost. Hope, maybe. "I made a little extra tonight," Alex continued, holding out the bag. "Figured you might be hungry." For a moment, the man just stared at the food, as if he couldn't believe it was meant for him. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it, his fingers brushing against the warm container. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice rough but full of sincerity. Alex smiled. "Take care, all right." And with that, he turned and walked back inside, not expecting anything in return. What he didn't know was that someone had been watching. The next day, as Alex was chopping vegetables in the kitchen, the restaurant's front door swung open with more urgency than usual. His boss, an older man with a thick accent and a heart just as big as the portions they served, called his name. "Alex, you need to come out here." Wiping his hands on his apron, Alex stepped out of the kitchen, confused. The restaurant was unusually quiet for this time of day, and then he saw why. A news crew, cameras, microphones, reporters, all standing in the middle of the restaurant. Customers had paused their meals, turning to see what was going on. The air buzzed with curiosity. Alex blinked. What's going on?" A woman holding a microphone stepped forward. "Alex, we're from Channel 9 News," she said, smiling. "We heard about what you did last night." Alex frowned. "What I did?" The reporter nodded. "You gave a homeless man a meal. Someone saw your act of kindness and told us about it, and we think the world needs to hear your story." His stomach flipped. He hadn't done it for attention. He hadn't even thought it was a big deal. It was just the right thing to do. But before he could say anything, the reporter continued. And that's not all. She paused for dramatic effect, the entire restaurant hanging on to her words. We have a surprise for you, something that might change your life forever. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what was coming next, but he had a feeling this was just the beginning. Alex felt his throat go dry as the reporter's words hung in the air. A surprise? Something that might change his life. The cameras were fixed on him, the microphone inches from his face, and the restaurant, which was usually filled with casual chatter, had fallen completely silent. He could feel everyone's eyes on him. His co-workers peeking from the kitchen, customers pausing mid-bite, his boss standing behind the counter with arms crossed, curiosity dancing in his expression. I don't understand, Alex finally said, his voice hesitant. He wasn't used to attention, especially not like this. The reporter gave a reassuring smile. You didn't expect this, did you? Alex shook his head. Not at all. It was just a meal to you, she said. But to someone else, it meant everything. She turned slightly, gesturing toward the restaurant door. And then, to Alex's shock, the homeless man from last night stepped inside. His eyes flickered around the room, as if unsure whether he really belonged there. He looked slightly different now. His shoulders weren't as hunched, and there was a hint of something in his face that hadn't been there before. Confidence? Relief? Alex felt his heart thump harder. He had helped this man once, expecting nothing in return. And now, here they were, standing in front of an entire news crew. The reporter continued. His name is Daniel, and last night, after you gave him that meal, something amazing happened. Alex turned his attention to Daniel, searching his face for answers. The man cleared his throat, shifting slightly on his feet. After I ate, I stayed near the restaurant, just thinking, he said, his voice low but steady. Then, out of nowhere, a woman came up to me. She said she had seen what you did, and she offered me a job. A murmur rippled through the restaurant. Alex's eyes widened. A job? Daniel nodded. She owns a small warehouse a few blocks from here. She said she needed extra hands, and that if I was willing to work, she'd give me a chance. He let out a small, almost disbelieving chuckle. All because you gave me dinner. Alex felt a wave of something indescribable wash over him. It was overwhelming, yet heartwarming at the same time. A single act of kindness. Something he hadn't even thought twice about had completely changed someone's path. The reporter let the moment sink in before she spoke again. That's what kindness does. It creates a ripple effect. And now, Alex, it's your turn to be on the receiving end. Alex blinked. What do you mean? She took a deep breath, clearly savoring the moment before delivering the big news. A well-known culinary school saw the footage of what you did. They believe chefs like you, the ones who cook with heart, not just skill, deserve a real opportunity. So they're offering you a full scholarship, a chance to train with some of the best in the industry. Gasps filled the restaurant. Alex felt the air leave his lungs. A scholarship. Culinary school. He had dreamed of something like this, but never. Thought it was within reach. He had grown up in a family where money was tight, where dreams had to be practical. Cooking had always been his passion, but his reality had kept him working in small kitchens, making ends meet. His boss clapped a firm hand on his shoulder. Well, say something, kid. Alex struggled to find the words. I don't know what to say. This is unreal. The reporter smiled. It's very real, Alex. And all because you chose to be kind when no one was watching. The weight of it all settled in. One simple act, packing an extra meal, had set off a chain of events he never could have imagined. Daniel had a second chance, and now so did he. But the moment wasn't just about them. It was about something bigger. Because in that small restaurant, in that ordinary moment, something extraordinary had happened. People weren't just hearing a story, they were feeling it. They were reminded that kindness matters, that even the smallest gestures could change lives in ways no one could predict. And as Alex stood there, still trying to process everything, he realized something else. This wasn't just about a meal. It never had been. It was about what happens when one person chooses to care. Alex stood there, still trying to make sense of everything. The lights from the cameras felt warmer now, not as overwhelming as they had a few moments ago. His heart pounded in his chest. Not from nerves, but from something else. Something unfamiliar, yet powerful. Hope. The restaurant had fallen silent, but the air was charged with emotion. His boss, who had always been a tough but fair man, had a rare look of pride in his eyes. The customers, who had come in for nothing more than a good meal, were now part of something much bigger than just another evening out. And Daniel, the man Alex had once seen, shivering outside, now stood taller, as if the weight on his shoulders had finally started to lift. But then, just when Alex thought he had wrapped his mind around the moment, Daniel spoke again. "There's something else," he said, his voice steady, but thick with emotion. "I wasn't always on the streets." The reporter turned her microphone toward him. Everyone was listening. Daniel swallowed hard, gathering his thoughts. "I used to be a chef too." A murmur spread through the room. Alex's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. Daniel gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "I worked in kitchens for years. I loved it, but life has a way of knocking you down sometimes. One bad thing led to another, and before I knew it, I had lost everything, my job, my home, my confidence." He paused, glancing at Alex. "But that meal you gave me, it reminded me what it felt like to be seen again, to matter." A lump formed in Alex's throat. He had never expected his small gesture to mean so much. The reporter, sensing the emotion in the air, leaned in slightly. "Daniel, if you had the chance, would you want to work in a kitchen again?" Daniel let out a soft laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. More than anything, Alex's boss, who had been silent up until now, suddenly cleared his throat. "Well then," he said, his voice gruff but warm, "if you're looking for work, I could use an extra set of hands in the kitchen." The entire restaurant erupted into applause. Daniel's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" Alex's boss nodded. "Serious as a heart attack. If you're willing to put in the work, I'm willing to give you a shot." Daniel's hands trembled slightly. But this time, it wasn't from the cold. It was from something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. "I won't let you down," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Alex grinned. "You're gonna love it here." And just like that, everything came full circle. Alex had changed Daniel's life with a single meal. And now the universe had found a way to repay him. Not just with the scholarship, but with something even more meaningful. The chance to bring someone else back to where they belonged. As the news crew wrapped up their segment, customers started approaching Alex, some shaking his hand, others simply offering words of encouragement. Strangers, people he had never met before, were moved by what had happened. It wasn't just about food. It was about kindness, about second chances, about the way one small act could create ripples far beyond what anyone imagined. That night, after the restaurant had closed and the cameras had been packed away, Alex stood outside for a moment, breathing in the crisp night air. He looked toward the corner where Daniel used to sit, now empty, and smiled, because sometimes The smallest gestures, like packing an extra meal, could change everything.